Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Mad Realms Vote to Kick. I'm your host, Jim, and with me, back from a trip, we have Arlee.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Hi. I'm tired.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So today it's a little more complicated for today's topic. For those of you who saw the tweet, you have an idea. There are games that define an entire genre. I specifically remember a time when everything was like God of War, but. And now, in current eras, it's like Dark Souls, but.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a game that defines a genre and is using that phrase like X, but reductive. Does it reduce other games to clones, or is it helpful in giving you a overview of how to understand how a game works just at a quick sentence? So before we get into that, I have two polls I have to reveal because the start of the year was just ridiculous for me. But as you can see right over here, this is the result from the Fallout 76 poll that I had with Fenris. 15 votes. It is 60-40 for Kick.
Huh. So people wanted to go away?
Fallout 76 want the boot. The people want the boot for Fallout 76.
Interesting.
So... Oh, we're the Dark Souls of Light debate streams. Thanks, Lint. I appreciate that. So hopefully, if I go ahead and I close this tab, it's going to immediately kick over to the other one. Nope. Thanks. Thanks, Internet. I appreciate that.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
It's black.
It's the abyss. So we'll just
right.
Can I get my hotkeys to work properly? There we go.
Yay.
No.
No.
Come on.
Nope. Apparently this one was so bad it went black.
Well, to be fair, it's multi-boxing and it's the same thing with only 10 votes. It's 60-40 Kick.
For multi-boxing?
For multi-boxing. People don't want multi-boxing either.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me. Interesting.
Yeah, so I can't say I'm terribly shocked by that.
Right.
And then this one is okay. But in standard fashion, old school fashion, while I edit the poll and get things working again, Arlee's going to take it away with her side of things. I believe you said you're going keep this time?
I am.
Okay.
So yeah, the main reason why I think we should keep it as a thing is because, like, when you're talking about a game and you have to list out all the aspects of it every time just to talk about it, it gets, redundant, and it gets really long, and it can take a lot of time and really slows down things. Plus, like, sometimes just listing out like attributes of a game doesn't necessarily get you to to convey the feeling of playing a game. Like just saying, oh, there's companions, and you go around and you fight things, and it's medieval, and you level, and there's a big bad you gotta fight, and shit like that, and you can romance them. Like, that could be a mini game, but it could also be, Dragon Age Inquisition. So I think it helps to convey a lot of feelings and ideas for people very quickly and very shortly. And it gives you a starting place to go from. And then, adding on the second part of like, but this is how it's different, makes it clear that it's not just a clone. So I think it's a good starting place. It shouldn't be the end of the conversation, though.
Okay. So yeah, I was hoping he would take longer so I could finish getting this done.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think I'll live. So my rebuttal to that, and that primarily, please tell me you're going to frickin' work when I click this button. Of course not. Because that should have been red.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, it's blue.
Yeah, it's blue because I hit keep. Shock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not what it's supposed to do. I have a problem with the phrase "like X," but primarily because, oh God, Google, why did you change your CSS? I recently started playing Darksiders 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I will admit, it has a similar setup to Dark Souls in that if you die, you drop your currency, souls, which, I mean, it was always souls in Darksiders, because that's just the way it was. So it's not something that ever really bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm trying to do too many things at once here. Let me get my thoughts out, and then I'll finish taking care of the poll. Mm-hmm. People will say that it is like God of War, but like Dark Souls, but, and it's funny that I say Darksiders. Is Darksiders 1 was another like God of War, but game. Mm-hmm. There are times when a game is like an iconic game defines popular mechanics. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's kind of useful. But at the same time, it's like people will use it to dismiss a game.
Right.
It's like, it's just a clone. And then that just throws all kinds of bad flags at a place, and then they end up getting like frickin' review bombed just for having the gall to be like another game. And depending on how iconic that game is, that comparison only serves to elevate the icon and cast further shadow on everything else around it, which means that basically no one else can make use of those mechanics other than that developer. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's like FromSoft, Dark Souls series, Bloodborne, they are backed into a corner where they kind of have to live up to the icon that they've created, which is one of the things where I'm not expecting another Dark Souls or Bloodborne from Sekiro when it comes out. I'm just looking forward to a cool game. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like all of the other games, like they have to live up to that. I mean, look at CD Projekt Red. They have to live up to The Witcher 3 with Cyberpunk 2077.
Right.
So not only does it cast a shadow on other games, it casts a shadow on everything else that company puts out.
Right.
So it's like, oh yeah, well, this game it's nothing like their previous one. So not only is it reductive to other games who end up using similar mechanics, it's reductive to further examples of a single game developer's product.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, with anything, there's good ways and bad ways to use it. Like, I think an example of also what you're talking about is, like, sometimes people will say it's like this game, but good, where it's not, like, disparaging the new game, it's disparaging the old game, which I think is kind of a problem as well. Oh, hi, Kat. Sorry. But, like, again, like, you can either go through and list all of the things, and like, I feel like, it would be worse if people were like just saying it's like Dark Souls and just leaving it like that, because that means in that, like, they haven't done anything different. If you have the but in there, that's pointing out like what they've done different, and can be like pointing out where they're taking things further or what they're doing, which can give a good frame of reference for people who either liked the old game or didn't like it. For example, an example I could use is you could say Diablo or PoE is like Diablo 3, but more complex, which for me, it's useful because, PoE is great, but I don't really feel like dealing with all of that complexity. I play D&D and can do that with complexity. Video games like that style of video game, I just want to sit down and play and bash things and experience the story. I'm not really looking for, a complicated, like, build experience. However, like for people who are looking for that, it's an easy way to compare those two for both groups of people. So people know which thing they should look at depending on what they want to play.
So, you know, that would make Rift like classic WoW, but more complicated.
Yes. I would say Rift is like classic WoW if classic WoW took LSD. It's crazy.
Okay. That's fair. I don't know. I think that the thing that really sparked this in my mind was actually Jim Sterling did a Jimpressions video of Darksiders 3.
Right.
And I'm not going to get into story or anything, but he basically said one of the things he stated is that the first Darksiders game was an unashamed ripoff of The Legend of Zelda. Like, they basically said that, I think there's a quote in an interview about it, is, we wanted Legend of Zelda and Devil May Cry.
Okay.
And that was the inspiration for Darksiders 1. To say that Darksiders 3 is inspired by Dark Souls is accurate. And then people were like, yeah, but the combat's not like Dark Souls. And it's like, the combat wasn't supposed to be about Dark Souls.
Right.
And this is one thing I was sitting there like trying to figure out how the combat meshed. And the whole point of a lot of the Darksiders games is to play a game that is like the Horseman that you're playing.
Okay.
So Darksiders 1, you played as War, who was, to quote Yahtzee, a monster truck that walks like a man.
Okay.
You are big, tanky, you don't have a lot of combos, but you don't need combos because things die. Death, I believe I was talking to Bog while he was playing Darksiders 2 on his stream. Death is like a finely tuned street race car.
Okay.
Lots of combos, very quick, very fluid combat. Fury in Darksiders 3 is more like a Formula One racer, where you have no option. And I'm going to say this, it's very similar to how aggressive Bloodborne is, but more so.
Okay.
Because if you do not attack, you die. You are like, you have to be constantly attacking and moving. And they implemented a similar thing to Dark Souls in that you cannot, like, once you do an animation, you are animation locked. And items have an animation, so using items in combat is a choice that you open yourself up to an attack. And they added a classic mode for combat that literally just lets you dodge cancel out of attacks. And items don't have a use animation. And those are the only two changes.
Right.
Which, to be honest, I changed to because it felt much more like the previous Darksiders editions. But I still often question my choice to put any points into health in that game.
Yeah.
I just feel like, depending on how... Like at all of my points, there tends to be caveats. I'm okay with it's like X, but, and you're talking about from a level playing field, like you just gave that big drawn out description of a medieval fantasy that has a huge cast of characters that your player character can romance, and I'm like, that's Dragon Age.
Right.
It's Dragon Age, but for that, like, it's Dragon Age or it's like Dragon Age. You can do that, and then you can explain the differences. But when I hear it's like Dark Souls, but I always hear, like, those big games, I hear it in such a like a chiding tone. Like, how dare the developers cheap out on this and just rip off this big game for, you know, easy gameplay mechanics and just to get a quick sale.
Well, like, the other thing is when it's used like that, I think it's really losing sight of the fact that, you know, I'm going to say most, I'm pretty sure it's all, but I'm going to say most game developers are video game fans. They like playing video games. That's why they decided to make video games. Most of them, I'm guessing. So, like, not expecting them to be inspired by other games or to take things that they see in other games and, like, implement them in their games and iterate on them. And like, that's how development happens. It happens in any kind of art form. It happens in painting, it happens in photography, it happens in music all the time. Music's a big one too, because it's so ubiquitous in the culture that, like, even musicians can't, like, most of the time if you ask a musician what their influences are, they can give you a list, but it's not at all inclusive. It's just the main things that they think of. It's not taking into account the stuff that they hear that they're not even aware of, because you're exposed to all of this stuff and it's subconscious. So like, it's everywhere. So like, I agree with you. Using it disparagingly is a bad thing, and people should try to not do that. But it's a very useful tool. It's kind of like people taking hammers and trying to hammer screws and stuff, I think.
Okay. And now, in thinking about this, as a games journalist, from that angle, is it something that you try to avoid, or is it kind of one of those things where you have to toe the line with how you use the it's like X but?
I personally try to avoid it as much as possible, just because, like, I feel like sometimes, especially with certain games, there's certain amount of baggage that comes up that you're not necessarily intending. Like, there are some games that I could compare the combat in good ways is similar to Mass Effect Andromeda, but I wouldn't want to compare the two because there's a lot of baggage with Mass Effect Andromeda that people would assume to go along with it, which I don't actually need. So like, you have to be careful on where the things are you're comparing and in what ways. Like, there are some games that can be similar in like the combat, but the rest of the gameplay is different, or vice versa, or like there's a lot of crossover. Especially like, it's harder and harder these days to talk about games within a genre because there's so much genre meshing and people taking things from different areas to make better games, and they are making better games, but it makes talking about them a little more wonky and a bit more difficult to do it without saying, think of these other games in comparison.
Okay, so it's even in probably the place that would use the phrase most in games journalism. It is something that needs to be towed, like, you have to toe a line very carefully with stuff like that.
You have to think about it, and like, you can't just like throw out whatever. I mean, you can, but like I said, you can find yourself into some wonky situations of like, where people will think there are things with it that you didn't necessarily intend.
Okay. And that's kind of where I come from with my like, how I see the phrase is, there's just so much riding on it, and I feel like, I don't know, this could be something to deal with current social standards for me that I see. It's just people jump on the first thought and that's it.
Right.
So my problem is, if you say it's like Dark Souls but and you have a negative tone to your voice, people are like, oh, so you're saying it's like Dark Souls but worse, so it's a ripoff.
Right.
And that's just the first thing that happens in their head. And because, social media has basically defined hot take culture, where it's just like, hey, that's the snappy thing that somebody just said, so clearly that's the entirety of the whole situation. There is no nuance, there are no shades of gray, there are no redeeming factors. It's just Dark Souls but bad.
Yeah. And also, like, it's worth noting that, like, often people are so varied and looking for so many different things in video games that often what some people consider bad about one game, other people will like that. And that's why these comparisons can be useful, because you can just put out the information of this is how it's different, so people can make the judgment of whether it's something they're interested in or not, without it being like necessarily just across the board good or bad. But you have to be careful with how you do that.
Yeah. That's a shout out to Mac from the Mad Realms Discord. The complexity of, like, PoE being complex. It's like, you hear people talk about the complexity of Path of Exile, and there are some people that look at the complexity of Path of Exile and they're just like, nope, you included. I kind of look at the complexity of Path of Exile and I'm like, that's intriguing.
Right.
But then I hear it's really punishing to try and respec anything. And I'm just like, now I'm done. So,
yep. Yeah.
Because that's a very old MMO style thing where you basically, if you put a point in somewhere wrong, you basically have to restart the character. And I'm just not a huge fan of that. But I suppose that's the thing, is it's often improperly used and is misconstrued due to hot take culture.
Right.
But I will concede that it can be useful when granted the proper phrasing and also the proper audience, because you can't just put everything on the writer or the content creator to try and phrase something in such a way that everyone will get it, because somebody will misconstrue your message.
Right. Well, and then the other thing is, like, with anything, you always have to keep in mind the person who is conveying the thought, because often they have their own agenda. Like, sometimes people, just sticking with the Path of Fire, Diablo 3, some people want to push that they believe for them that Path of Exile is a better game, and they push that, and that's how they use it. But you have to be aware of that and take that into account. Like, just because it's better for them doesn't mean it's better overall. That's something that could be totally debatable.
Right.
Again, it's what you want out of the game.
Yeah. So, and as Lint brings up Lords of the Fallen, which I will admit was very Dark Souls-y. It was a Norse themed game. I believe it was loosely Nordic themed. And it added the mechanic of your soul, like your currency that dropped when you died, decayed over time.
Oh.
So you had a sense of urgency to get back to where you were, to retrieve your lost progress.
Oh, basically. So the longer it took you to get back to it, the less you recovered.
Exactly. Like there was a decay, and there was, like, if you took too long, you just lose out on everything. And to be honest, when the first From Software game that I really played in earnest was Bloodborne. When I died, I thought, like, and this is even more representative of this idea, is I thought that mechanic came from Dark Souls and Bloodborne. So I was rushing to get back to where my blood echoes dropped, because I thought I was losing out. And the number of times my friend Scott, who introduced me into the games, was just like, no, that was just Lords of the Fallen. That was just that one game.
Right.
So the most recent God of War was pretty much loved. It's a great game. All around, still got hit with the it's like Dark Souls, or even like The Last of Us, when really it was...
Well, so, like, that's the Last of Us God of War comparison is interesting, because it is accurate in that the entirety of both games were essentially escort missions. Like, you had this person who could be useful and could do things, but the whole thing was you're helping this person get to somewhere. That's the whole point of the game. But, like, this, again, like, it's useful in that one aspect, but outside of that aspect, it's not a good comparison, because outside of that one aspect, those games are very different. They feel very different to play. The setting is very different. Like, your mentality when you go into the game and how you can be successful playing the game has to be different.
Yeah, because wasn't like a large portion of The Last of Us practically stealth, because the zombies were auditory as opposed to having, like, vision a lot of the time?
Yeah, there was a stealth component, but like
there is no stealth component in God of War.
Right. Yeah. Although I did discover in God of War you could sneak past some of the giants, because there were moments where I was like, I don't want to fight you, and I just skirted around them. So it was possible, but
part of me just viscerally reacted with, that's really cowardly. That's not a God of War thing.
Yes, but I also had a hard time getting into that game. And there were moments with those giants where I was like, I really just don't feel like fighting you right now. Come on.
And I do understand, in the similar vein, I do understand the Dark Souls comparison to the combat,
Mm-hmm.
in that it is a combat, like it, you are locked into animations.
Mm-hmm.
You have to react quickly, dodging, parrying, which is the best thing to do at the time,
Right.
blocking. There is a certain level of similarity in the combat style there. But I also agree it kind of falls apart past that, because you have people that talk to you in not riddles in God of War.
Right.
Whereas I won't speak to Dark Souls because I really haven't gotten through it, but Bloodborne, the only reason I didn't beat Bloodborne is because my original PS4 bricked. You have to, like, shout out to Vadi Vidya, because, like, I would not know anything about the goddamn game without him having all these, like, giant
nothing in
lore
that
videos.
game is straightforward.
Which, to be honest, I love. I love figuring shit out like that. But at the same time, it's like God of War. You had, I want to call him Boy, but that's not his name. Atreus.
Atreus. Yeah.
You had Mimir offering color commentary all the time. It's just, there were characters that spoke.
Yeah.
So that's, even in the storytelling, it's not anywhere close to Dark Souls. But I think at this point we're kind of belaboring the point. My kick is more to make sure that people speak about, like, they phrasing, to quote Archer. It's like X, but cannot be used idly. You have to be careful with the phrase. To the point where I kind of wish people would stop using it. But then your point is that, it kind of saves a lot of time in explaining, because, I mean, I could go back and look and, flash up on the screen how much time it took you to explain what Dragon Age was without saying it's like Dragon Age.
Yeah.
But, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mad Realm's Vote to Kick. I've been your host, Jim. You can find me on Twitter at MalthanusMMO. You can find me here on twitch.tv/MadRealms every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then afterwards, we've got Zero to Hero, our Guild Wars 2 ranked PvP shenanigans. My guest this week has been Arlee. You can find her on Twitch and Twitter and Instagram at Arlee82. And I don't know if I can talk about what the thing is, but she did a thing.
I did a thing.
I mentioned that she was on a trip earlier. And even on her social media, she took pictures of first-class food. Like,
yeah.
I just looked at that, like I looked at it, and you actually had, like, a full-course meal, and you had room to set it out. And I'm just like, is this what first class is?
Which, to be clear, the plane flight was paid for. I paid for the upgrade to first class because it happened to be fairly cheap. And I was like, you know what? I'm curious. Let's see what first class is like. So, to be clear, they did not pay for the first class.
But they did pay for the plane ticket in the first place.
Yes.
But
yes.
She did a thing. She went to a place. Neither of us are particularly clear if we can say what she did at what place, but there will be an article that she will be writing.
It'll be up on Friday. So Friday morning on mmorpg.com.
So go ahead and watch out for her article there. And I hope you all join us next time. Oh, yes, channel is also live on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our weekly Guild Wars 2 News podcast, Talking Scrit. We've got some stuff to talk about this weekend, folks. That could be, similar to, it could be involved in our multi-boxing discussion from the last Vote to Kick. So, I hope you all have a fantastic evening, and I hope to see you all here next week and on Saturday. Good night, everybody.
Yay.